From the nation's capital, this is the Fly Fishing Consultant Podcast with your host, Rob Snowhite.
Hey, it's Rob Snowhite here. This is episode 271 of the Fly Fishing Consultant Podcast. This episode is part 2 with Art Noglak of Quarantine Fly Time Talk. This episode is all about streamers. You're going to hopefully learn everything and more you ever wanted to know about streamers. The next one is going to be warm water, fly fishing, and tying with Art. And you're going to hear me next week talk about my crazy recent weekend with snakeheads. It's been a crazy spring out here in Northern Virginia. It's super humid and hot today. We're expecting a fun summer. The boat ramps are finally open. Maybe we can even get in and wade and cool off since the pools are going to be closed. So this is episode 271. We're going to go talk to Art now and hope you are home, being safe, wearing a mask, social distant your fly fishing. Thanks for downloading. All right, so we have Art with us. This is the second installment of Mostly Quarantine Stuck at Home. And this one is going to be cold water streamers for trout, right?
Awesome.
Now,
yeah.
I want to tell people about my strange phone call. I told you about it, right?
Yeah, you did. You did tell me.
This woman calls me up. She asks me if I can catch her some fish for her aquarium. I'm like, sure, why not? I said, why don't you come by? I'll just collect some with some small flies from the creek, and you can come get a bucket and take them home. She's like, nah, I was thinking something bigger than minnows. I was like, what you want, lady? Like largemouth? You want bluegill? She's like, no, one of those dolphins. And I said, a mahi? She's like, no, bottlenose. And I'm like, lady, first off, that's a mammal. Second, I don't think you can catch them that way. And third, I don't think it's legal. How big is your aquarium? She was very confused.
I think someone was messing with you, Rob.
I don't know. And then today I had to call the cops because people were throwing their cast nets in at Chain Bridge and then swimming out about 15 feet and going under to untangle them.
Wow.
Crazy stuff.
That's ballsy. Yeah,
enough with me. What have you been up to since we last spoke on dry flies?
I've been here tying flies. I have been out fishing a couple times, and that's it. Just a handful of fishing excursions and a lot of tying flies, reorganizing. I'll tell you what I've been up to. So fortunately, I had a lot of things in my vehicle. I was doing a lot of cleaning fly lines and reels and reorganizing, and I had a bunch of stuff in my car. And unfortunately, the garage that my car is parked in had a bunch of break-ins. My car got broken into, and a lot of my equipment was stolen. I had to make an insurance claim, and as a result of the insurance claim, I've been doing a lot of replacing and online shopping and that sort of stuff. So it's unfortunate, but it's been kind of a little bit fun, just sort of re-kitting, if you will.
You upgrading anything, getting some new stuff? And were there sentimental things that...
Yeah, there were. To be honest, like a lot of this stuff that was taken, there was obviously rods, a lot of reels and things like that. There were definitely a lot of flies that I spent many hours tying that, you just don't get that time back. So in that way, they're somewhat sentimental, but, it was mostly just, gear, which is all replaceable.
If we see somebody fishing an Art Noglak rod, do we call you?
Yeah, right.
Have Joe Humphreys come down and work them?
Yeah,
he'll take them down. All right, so this is your chance to convince me to throw more than just one pattern for streamers. So I only throw my bacon fly. So we're going to get into everything streamer related. And then we'll talk about the history and fishing and techniques and tying and everything else. You ready for this?
I'm ready.
All right, so streamers used to be rather small and rather basic, and they seem to have taken a back seat to modern articulated flies. Do you want to talk about what an old school streamer may have been compared to what you would see now. As working in a fly shop, you've seen the evolution of this throughout the years. And why don't people fish those old Mickey Fins? And you don't hear about the Kiwi muddler anymore. Nobody really talks about muddler minnows.
Yeah, I think that a good, like, to me at least, and I'm sure there's older ones. To me, the old school patterns are the the deer hair, the small deer hair bugs, right? The small deer hair streamers. Whether it's a black nosed dace or a Mickey Fin or they're very slim and sort of have a bait fish, small minnow kind of profile to them. What's the other? Oh, the gray ghost is another one. They might have like a little chicken hackle hanging off the back or something very simple. And these are typically flies that you would see tied from a size 10, maybe up to a size 4 would be a huge one. And those were popular for many years, and lots of great fish were taken on them. And then I think just with the advent of tying and really more so probably fly rod technology, where you had the ability to throw these heavy streamers and heavier flies on freshwater tackle, you started to see flies get larger and larger and larger. And it's not to say that those smaller streamer patterns do not work. They still work to this day. And in fact, there are some situations and on some streams that I've seen them work, much better than things like woolly buggers. A really good example is I watched a good friend of mine and former coworker, Jake Kwapazeski. We were fishing a spot on the west branch of the Delaware, and at the time he was fishing that stream religiously, and we were swinging down through with our spay rods in this really long stretch that held a lot of big fish. I went down through with a larger fly and didn't hook anything, and he was actually behind me with a much smaller kind of a gray ghost type of fly, and he hooked. I think he only landed one, but he hooked 3 very large fish that were all 20 inches or better in the same stretch that I put a much bigger fly through. So, and he swears by those types of patterns. If you ask some of the guys at, the West Branch Angler Resort, there's a guy, Ben, there that catches a lot of big fish and is a really friendly dude. He swears by these old school small patterns, and then a big pattern for him might be like a deceiver or something like that. So he'll even use like sparser saltwater patterns in there for those larger fish. They still work.
Big fish eat big flies and little flies, but can little fish eat the big flies too?
Yeah, I think I spent a lot of time, especially probably it's probably been in a while now, but maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I really caught the streamer bug. And not that I hadn't had it before, but I just kind of started fishing a lot of streamers for trout, a lot of big streamers for trout, and I really got into catching. I was really always targeting really much larger fish, and kind of gave up on nymphing and dry fly fishing for a long time. To me, it's far more amazing how small of a fish will eat a 6 to 8 inch fly than it is how large of a fish will eat a 6 to 8 inch fly. Yeah, so lots of 10, 11, 12, 13 inch fish are definitely caught fishing 6, 7 inch long streamers for sure.
It's amazing what you can have a fish put their mouth around to try and swallow. It's like watching the birds down on the river, seeing a cormorant eat like a small gizzard shad. You're like, how did you fit that in there?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've always wondered how they fly after eating all that weight in fish.
How many did they eat? Are they like gorging down on a lot?
See them just guzzle down gizzards and herring all day long.
Wow.
I've seen blue herons eat full-grown female, like shad roe full gizzards and fly away.
How do they digest them? Somebody told me there's like an acid in their stomach or belly or something, because they're obviously not chewing.
Yeah.
It's just like that little skinny neck. How do they not get caught in there?
Just the way it goes down. Birds also don't have a gag reflex, which is how you can make foie gras. They just swallow things whole.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do we know who came up with the idea for an articulated fly for streamers?
I have no idea. I'm just curious. I have to Google that.
Yeah, I don't know who came up with that. I don't know where it came out, but that seems to be the modern thing, the appearance of modern streamers. And 99% of those big streamers I see on social media that people are tying, you'll never actually see those in a fish's mouth. I feel like people are using Instagram just to boast their creativity and their monstrosities, which leads me to my next question. I feel that the modern streamer is a Rube Goldberg machine to catch fish. Overly complicated with lots of extra things in it to do a simple task. Where we just mentioned the gray ghost, the Mickey fin, the deer hair muddler. Those would all catch huge fish back in the day. I think people just want to show off their skills, but they don't actually fish a lot of the things. You don't see the same people fishing the flies that they're posting.
I'll tell you this. There's a couple layers to this. I don't know that I agree with your sentiments, and I want to make sure I'm not misquoting you, but I think that modern streamers catch more fish than these old school patterns that we're talking about. Unlike nymphs and dry flies, where I think that the old school patterns that we've had for many, many generations are just as good, if not better, as some of the new advents. I think that fly tying technology and materials, and specifically the creativities of the tires, have given us, especially in streamers, have given us more variety and more versatility in our bugs, especially with the advent of Flightline technology, having the ability to have, sink tips and full sinking lines and, intermediate lines and floating lines that are tapered in such a way that you could turn over a really heavy fly with not a lot of line out or not having to carry a lot of line. All of these things combined, I think, have really helped the streamer game. Not that you're wrong that, and I've been guilty of this too, that, especially as somebody who doesn't get to fish anywhere near as much as I want to, I'm in the shop all the time, 50 hours a week, and I have a wife at home, and, you get all this, time to, you don't get as much time rather as you want to fish. Fly tying, however, is a way that you can kind of stay connected to the sport in times that you can't get out. You can always find an hour here or there, especially on a rainy day, where you can sit down and tie some flies. And I do think that a lot of the creative, especially the very creative streamers that you see coming out, of course, there are a lot of people that, they spend a lot of time on that. And to me, it's kind of like almost like a piece of artwork or something. So yes, so I understand what you mean, and I think you're right. I think in a lot of cases you don't see a lot of those flies in a lot of fish's mouths, but I think that's more correlation and not cause. I think the reason you don't see a lot of big streamers in a lot of fish's mouth is more because you don't catch a lot of fish on a lot of big streamers. I don't think it has to do with any of the pattern. I don't think it matters if it's a size 2, 8-inch long Mickey fin or a size, or a game changer. I just think it's highly unlikely. Like when I go out, when we're fishing these larger streamers, if you catch a fish or two in kind of the 20-inch range, which is to me what I consider to be a big fish. We're kind of in big, like serious fish territory once we get to that 20-inch mark and over. That's kind of the point. I've done a lot of reading where it says, kind of 18 inches and up is when they sort of shift to a mostly predatory ambush diet. I kind of lost my train of thought a little bit, but the point is I am a firm believer that modern streamers are better and do catch more fish than your old school jams. That being said, I still think a woolly bugger probably takes more trout than any other one fly out there.
Okay.
But I don't think a size 6 woolly bugger is taking as many 20 to 24 inch fish than large streamers.
All right. What are these large streamers mimicking? Are people trying to match the hatch, or are there specific organisms? And when I read about trout in cold water, it's always about the sculpin. It seems that most people want to just imitate a sculpin, but there seems to be a lot of other things out there. Your flies you carry in the shop, what are they representing that a trout would eat?
So I in my fly tying, I really, especially for trout, I really try to stay. I want to tie things that are, or I want things that are representative of many things. Similar to a woolly bugger, right? Just on a much larger scale. A woolly bugger I think was originally tied to look like a hellgrammite, but it could be a small sculpin or a bait fish or a crayfish, or it's just very indicative of a lot of different, or suggestive rather, of a lot of different things. And even when I go to larger streamers, I kind of want to keep that look. Trout, large trout in that 20 to 24 inch class eat a lot of different foods. Everything from small rodents, bait fish, like, whether it's shad or other trout or dace or small suckers, whatever, depending on what's in the system, obviously, and on to your sculpins and your crayfish and, snakes and whatever else. There's ducks. There's a wide variety of food sources that these predators eat. And some of them, and just because they're very large doesn't mean they're also not bug eaters too, right? I mean, there's a lot of places that I fish where I was in an undisclosed location the day before yesterday where I was watching fish that were certainly in that 20-inch class eating what was probably midges, or spinners. But, I don't think that you're matching the hatch, to answer your question. I think that you're giving a fish a food source to ambush that is suggestive of something that's readily available, right? I think some tyers definitely try to make flies that look exactly like a little brown trout or exactly like a little sculpin. But the ones that, in my opinion, are the most effective are the ones that are suggestive of a food source, a wide variety of fish in the right color and the right silhouette.
All right, we're going to get more into that in a bit. Are there any well-known tyers and not so much well-known, maybe underground tyers that are big influencers for you, for your company, or just in general that you hear, read, see about, people you've met along the way?
There's tons of tyers like that, and everyone knows, who they are, and, you can add me to the long list of people that, have great things to say about Callie Gallup and Charlie Craven and newer innovative guy, Blaine Chocolate has figured out a way to turn every single fly in the world into a game changer of some variety, which is really cool. Greg Sanyo as being a native Clevelander and cutting my teeth on steelhead. Greg Sanyo was influenced a lot of my tying, growing up. So there's lots of them. And we're talking specifically streamers. Yeah, I mean, there's tons of stuff. There's a guy I follow on Instagram. His handle is Sven Diesel. He's a really cool, innovative fly tyer that uses a lot of unconventional materials and techniques and colors. So yes, there's definitely a ton. I do think that in your, I'll give you an example. You talked about like the advent of like articulated streamers versus, these older patterns that we, sort of grew up on. Most of these flies work so well, in my opinion, because they're largely exactly the same. Like, and that's not to take anything away from the tyers that created them, that are often, you know, people that I have a lot of respect for and appreciate their ingenuity. But, you know, there isn't in the water when you're stripping it, anecdotally in the moment, there's not much difference between a circus peanut and a double gonga and a sex dungeon and you know, Schulte's S4 and you know, and the list goes on and on and on and on. It's a double hook thing with a woolly bugger on the back end and something else on the front end, you know, and if you know, some have rubber legs and some don't. Some have flash and some don't, but they're all pretty much the same fly.
That's my burger analogy. Like, the fly is just a burger. You add bacon to it, it's bacon cheeseburger. You add something else to it, you get to call it something else. But it's still the same original palette that everyone starts with, but you can just add and subtract other things. But they're still, I can still see how they're all related.
Correct. And you know, I think about it more like, you know, when I look at like my most successful, you know, we call them streamer days, you know, and days that I've had the most action on streamers. I am definitely not convinced that it was the fly. You know what I mean? Ever. I think that sometimes some flies might work a little bit better than others, but largely, like, if you know, to me, it's more the like sort of size and silhouette of whatever, you know, it is I'm using, and the fact that they want to be grabby that day and they want to chase things around. And if something's working, I'm going to keep using it. But the reality is if I tied on like something slightly different, you know, in a similar size, even if it's a different color, I still think they're going to chase it most of the time. You know, all right. So I think, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
We're going to move into some professional fly shop questions now.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the popular streamers you currently carry in the fly shop when you were open before?
Yeah, before the COVID thing. I mean, you know, so, you know, obviously, let's talk about like 1 hook and 2 hook streamers. You know, articulated and non. In the non-articulated department, obviously, you know, your smaller streamers are going to be woolly buggers and golden retrievers are the two most popular.
That's a regional fly invented by Jim Finn. You want to talk about the golden retriever?
You know more about it than me at this point. I'm not from here. To me, it's just a woolly bugger.
He used to fish on Mossy Creek. He originally owned mossycreek.com, I think.
Oh,
There's
really?
a guy named Jim Finn, and it's sort of this just small peachy colored woolly bugger with a bead and was it like red thread collar?
Yeah.
And the kids love it here. It catches a ton of fish.
It does. Yeah, people swear by it, and I've sold a ton of them. I don't know that I've ever even personally used one myself, but I know it works because people rave about it. And it comes in lots of colors too. It's not just the peach now. Now they, you know, local tires tie them in all kinds of different colors.
And an old one that probably predates you is the Patuxent River Special, which had the reverse hackle on it, and I think maybe had some kind of foxy fur tied into it. Have you ever even heard of that fly?
I think I have. I think I've heard it mentioned before, but I don't know it. You know, and obviously, like, the flies that I carry really are, you know, we order all of our flies, you know, so a lot of the stuff is just stuff that I know that has worked. So I've brought, you know, into the Orvis stores in the area, I've brought a lot of sort of my Midwest flavor to our fly assortments, right? So I carry a lot of, you know, Schulte's flies. You know, those were always really big. You know, Senyo's and Schulte's flies were really big in my areas and flies that I grew up on. So,
that's Schultz out of Ypsilanti?
I think it's Ypsilanti, I don't know, Michigan. But he does a lot. There's a lot of great, you know, amazing smallmouth patterns that he ties that are just phenomenal for trout too, and some for steelhead as well. So some of my favorites are, again, like in the single hook type of jam, or some of his like Schulte's red-eyed leech patterns. Schulte's Steech is another pattern that I really like. His crayfish patterns. He's got like a clear water and a clear water cray, and or no, is it a low water cray, and some other, you know, look his stuff up. He's, if I had to pick one one tire that, or sort of one person's flies that I've always had tons of success on, it would definitely be his stuff.
What about streamers that are tied commercially versus homemade? Like, I've picked up fly shop game changers and they're very stiff. Are there certain flies that just kind of come out not as
yes, but it's not the fly. It's the batches. Sometimes it's the company you're getting them from. So like a perfect example is like I've had times where I get double gongas from Umpqua, for instance, and they come out amazing, and I'm extremely happy with them, right? But other times, they're not as good, right? There's some flies that look phenomenal, but I don't like the hook on it. And not even that the hook is cheap. It's just that it's the wrong hook. There's so many, and actually that double gonga is a perfect example. I love that fly. When you buy it commercially, I find it to, in my own personal opinion, and not that it doesn't catch a lot of fish, and not that Charlie Craven ties his own fly on the wrong hook, but to me, the hook gap, you're using a nymph hook to tie that articulated streamer, and the hook gap is too small. And I was talking to a person at a fly shop not too long ago, somebody who works in a fly shop, and I brought this point up to that person, and that person said, well, that's because that doesn't really matter because fish eat the rear hook 90% of the time, was the quote. And the first thing I thought in my head is, I probably catch 90% of my fish on the front hook. So when I'm fishing for trout and I'm fishing an articulated streamer, and I thought about this the other day, I tagged them. I actually tagged four fish in a place, undisclosed place, yesterday or 3 days ago, that were all brown trout, all 20 inches or better, fishing streamers. It was a really good day, and I'm not going to hotspot it, so don't ask me. But all of them were on the front hook, and I catch most of my fish on the front hook when I tie the fly, because I use a pretty wide gap hook, and I can leave a lot of space on that front hook because I find that large predatory fish do not casually swim up to a bait fish and grab it on the tail. They smash it at the head of the bait to kill it. And I think what happens is, I think that person in that shop that I was talking to, I think that he's probably throwing those commercial streamers where the hook gap's too small and they're getting hits, and when on the strip set they're hooking it with the rear hook. I think that often happens. I know that was a little long-winded, but for me, if you hook a fish on that second hook, you either did something wrong or the fish did something wrong, or there was a weird angle. I don't know about you, but for me with trout, maybe it's just the angles that I'm fishing at. I get them in the front hook almost every time.
Now, do you ever find people, they have misconceptions about streamers? Not like, hey, I need a Nancy P to go brook trout fishing, but do people read things and see things in magazines and on movies and then come in with these expectations that I need to buy this big fly, or I need to buy a certain streamer only to catch a huge fish? Do people come in with just, you're like, let's have a cup of coffee and I need to explain some things right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they have misconceptions that as soon as they tie a large fly on, that somehow that's going to attract all the larger fish to their fly. And what they don't realize is what they're seeing on Instagram and on social media is you're seeing what is a few things. You're seeing people that post every big fish they've ever caught, and they're fishing a ton, right? You're also seeing guides that are putting large fish in the boat on a consistent basis, but what you forget is they have two clients fishing, doing the same thing down a river all day, every day. So of course they're gonna come up with these larger fish. And not to take anything away from these people, they got every right to be super proud of all the big fish that they're catching. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is it's not like, you come in with a 7-inch fly and you come and you buy a 7-inch fly and you strip it around all day and you're gonna catch multiple fish that are 2 feet long. That's not the case. There's a lot of time you have to put. I say this about every fly. It's so much less about the fly than we think it is. I don't mean to sound arrogant, but if you give me any, 6-inch large streamer and any color combination you can think of, but if you give me like the right boat and the right amount of time on the right river, I'm gonna catch big trout on it. It doesn't matter. Even if it's a terrible fly, I'm probably gonna catch big trout on it because I know where to put it and I know how to strip it and I know how to present it, and that takes time and energy and years. And of course, some flies are better than other flies at certain times, but it's not the fly. There's no secret sauce to, it's just like rubber worms. Rubber worms are the same thing. It's like there are many times when that's just a terrible fly. There's times where it's a good fly, but there's times when it's a terrible fly. Do a lot more fish like the rubber worm than the pheasant tail? Probably not. But it's more forgiving, right? You can fish it bad and still catch a fish consistently. And I think people kind of think that that's how the streamer game works, that like somehow the articulated larger streamers are somehow going to attract the big fish to their line. And I just think that's it. Yeah, I do have to have that conversation a lot.
Do you ever have strange requests about streamers?
Yes, I have lots of strange requests. Like you get a lot of like, well, why don't they tie this fly with a bunch of lead wrapped on it and a bunch of or why doesn't this have dumbbell like lead eyes? Why does it have plastic eyes? Or why does it, and I think what they don't understand is like the fly, often, and of course you explain it to them and then they understand, but flies are tied, these tires have a very specific purpose for the fly, which is why it doesn't have a lot of weight. It's meant to be fish on a sinking line, or things like that. Or we get what's a good request for? I'm trying to think. I know I get strange streamer requests.
Has anybody tried to return a streamer saying they were unable to catch a fish with it?
I don't think I've had that. No, I don't think I've had that.
What's a good upsell when someone comes in to buy streamers? What are add-ons?
Add-on, and I hesitate to even freaking call it upsell because, but I think the big thing is fluoro tippet. I think that definitely is something. I mean, when you're dragging a heavy fly through rocks and on the bottom, and you're getting streamers, you tend to get hooked a lot in trees and wrapped around branches and bark, and so that more abrasion resistant tippet material is an easy add-on. A hook sharpener is something that I swear by. You're going through all this work to look for these big fish. You want to make sure you stick them when he eats. So that's a kind of an easy suggestion for people. Another one is some sort of drying patch. You do not want to take, especially streamers, and put them wet back into your fly box when you use them. You can rust that whole fly box and all the flies in it pretty easily doing stuff like that.
Do you ever put silica packets, like when someone buys a pair of shoes at the store and the silica pack falls out, you ever throw that thing in your fly box?
No, I've never thought of doing that. Does that work?
Oh yeah, I always keep them in there.
Does it really?
Yeah.
Wow, like they're like in the bottom of like my beef jerky bags.
Yeah, we collect all those. The ones you get with like nori and shoes. Now, I used to grind them up and keep them in a film canister. And when I worked in Colorado, I was told
Fly float.
I was told not to keep crushed up silica as a white powder in a film canister in the shop because someone would snort it. I was like, well, okay then. Yeah, but yeah, I used to just crush them up, and I had film canisters because I used to shoot a lot of film, and I would just carry around crushed up shoe packets, like the stuff that Elaine put in the salsa on Seinfeld. We keep them just for if your iPhone gets wet, you collect them, throw them in a Ziploc bag with all of those.
Yeah. We get a lot of strange, and this is an ode to, I think, the ode to Blaine. Like, you get a lot of game changer type requests, but then when you put them in the shop, people don't want to pay for them. Like, they're expensive because they're very time consuming to tie, and they're not hard to tie. Most game changers are actually amongst some of the easiest flies. I mean, I'm not going to say it's beginner level, but for as far as advanced fly tying goes, the game changer is one of the easier flies you can tie. I mean, it's largely the exact same motion with one material over and over and over and over and over again. You're basically articulating a shank, tying on a material, articulating a shank, tying on a material. It's all the same material all the way down. Cutting and trimming is another technique all in its own. But I find like the game changer type flies, even even especially the feathered ones, to be pretty straightforward, and they look great in the water, and that kind of stuff does catch fish, but they are time consuming. I don't believe them to work better than regular articulated flies with one articulation. I believe them to work just as good. Anytime I will also always take pulsation, if that's a word, over articulation. I don't always want if you look at a fish and the way that a fish moves, it does not snake. You know what I mean? Like, its body doesn't gyrate. Maybe that's not the word. It doesn't
move
it
like
doesn't
a lamprey or an eel.
Right, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't hinge, right? They have those large forked or those large paddles on their tail for a reason, because one small movement, similar to a rudder, one small movement has a net energy effect that allows that fish to move without all of that effort, right? So a lot of times, like, to be honest, although there's a lot of movement, and I have caught lots of fish on game changers because it is very attractive with the movement, it's less realistic, in my opinion, than a fly that's more profile, more of the correct profile, less of the undulation. But I'll be damned if that thing doesn't catch tons of fish, because it does, So I'm not saying that. And Blaine is an extremely creative dude. The reality is as it relates to boots on the ground, guys in fly, and I've worked in many shops, we don't sell a lot of them. Even if people typically buy what you suggest, regardless of the price. That one is kind of where people start drawing the line. Like, they start drawing the line at like $10, right?
Yeah, like when Bisharat's Pole Dancer came out, it's like $16.95 for a topwater fly. Like, I don't understand how people spend 20-something bucks on a crankbait. Like,
I don't either.
Punch me in the nose and throw my wallet in the garbage can.
Yeah. The musky flies, definitely, like, those get to be pretty big and expensive. But it's tough. It's very tough to get people in the shops to buy to spend on those game changers. And also too, I see a lot of mini game changers in shops. Also mini gongas. I see a lot of like the shop. I don't think the shops typically sell a lot of big streamers, at least in our area, because you don't see them in there often, right?
You gotta go to
Like once it starts to get over 4 inches, it's very slim pickings.
Right. More of like Michigan, Missouri, Montana.
Yeah. We carry a lot of big flies in our shop, but our staff does a lot of hunting for big browns.
Like Trunzo's been out. He got a really pretty one the other day. Was that with you?
May have been. I don't know when. That depends on when you posted it. But
all right.
We were out very recently, and he did get into a big one that we took a photo of. I'm not a photo taker of trout. I don't take a lot of. I almost never take photos of the big ones anymore.
Do you have an adult beverage with you right now too?
I do. I have a low pitch juicy IPA by Highwire Brewing. It's really good. I like it.
Sounds tastier than my hams I got here. America's classic premier beer, born in the land of sky blue waters. Ham since 1865. Yummer. All right, let's talk about fly tying. We're going to talk about everything that goes into this stuff and why. So maybe just take one of your favorite streamers. What makes an effective, productive streamer?
Effective, productive streamer. It's got to look like multiple things, right? You have to be able to look at it and convince yourself that it's more than one thing, right? To me, like, it's got to be, and we're talking trout. It's a completely different conversation if I'm talking warm water or
we'll do that podcast in June.
Yeah,
or if it ever gets hot here.
Or salt water.
I'm cold in the basement right now too.
The reason is, man, and here's the thing. We're talking cold water, and let me talk about cold moving water. I don't know anything about still water trout fishing at all. But in cold moving water, if you're fishing a streamer effectively, if the water's moving, the fly is moving, right? You don't, especially with larger streamers and larger fish, you don't want the fish to be able to inspect it for very long, right? You have an ambush predator situation, an opportunistic fish situation. You want to be moving that fly in a fashion that you're going to be able to tighten the line and detect the strike immediately. You're going to be able to set the hook, and you're giving movement and action of the fly that's indicative of a real bait fish or whatever it is you're trying to imitate. But the thing is I don't want something that looks, exactly like a black-nosed dace or something that looks exactly like a sculpin necessarily. Those things, not that those things don't work, because they do. But I want something that's indicative of a lot of different things. My all-time favorite, day in, day out, big streamer is a double gonga. It's always been. And when I mean double gonga, I mean Circus Peanut too. I mean Sex Dungeon as well. I mean the Schultz's S4 Sculpin. Those are all the exact same fly to me. And they all work just as good because they're exactly the same. There is very, very little difference in action and appearance if tied in the right color and in the right way once they're in the water and you get to ripping on it. I don't know. Are we in agreement on that? Like,
yes.
Those are pretty damn similar.
Do you have a color motif? Do you do like the olive, blackish, brownish?
I do, and my color motif isn't off the wall. It's not normal. I am like, well, I shouldn't say it's not normal. It's not that. It's not like you fish a lot of like really vibrant stuff for non-steelhead salmon species and catch fish, which is awesome. But mine is I have this like brownish, goldish, orangish. If you look at the flies that I tie, I first of all, I like a lot of dimension in color. Very rarely do you ever see me tie one solid color or even two. I usually have 3 to 4 colors going on in my flies at all times, so I'm always hiding like accent fibers. Like when I tie a double gonga, for instance, it looks it looks like Charlie Craven's bug, but I add a lot of different things. I've got I've got a bigger hook, a wider gap hook on the front end of the
Let's
fly.
talk about the wider gap. You mentioned earlier about that wrong hook. What does the gap do for you?
So I'm convinced that you need space between, well, on the front hook especially, you need space between the head of the fly and the point of the hook, right? So you have to imagine that I believe that large predatory trout attack from the side. I think they T-bone the fly or hit it right at the head.
Stun it, come around, and then gobble it up.
Correct.
Because they don't want to burn more energy
right.
chasing it than they're going to gain from eating it, and they don't
Yeah.
want to injure their eyes or their mouth.
Right, and I'm not, people say that they nip at them from the back. I think that's ridiculous.
That's sad.
Yeah,
That ain't trout.
I don't think that anybody that's trying to swallow something is going to, nip it in the tail. That just doesn't.
You need to swallow things head first. Otherwise they get stuck.
Correct. So I think they hit it from the front. And I think that if the head of the fly is too bulky relative to the gap of the hook, you stand to miss that fish. So like, as just sort of a general, I guess, guideline for me is the gap. Like, I need to be able to put my thumb or pointer finger through the gap without touching anything, without any problem at all. And I think that I get more hookups that way, and less missed fish.
All right, we're gonna break down everything that goes into a streamer. What is your preferred thread these days for tying? And not just the strength. Are you a color person?
I am not a color person with thread. Unless, of course there's exceptions. If I'm using like a clouser, if I'm tying a clouser minnow, yes, I have to have the right color thread because you can tell, you can see it. But on most streamers, unless I'm, looking for a hot spot or something, I'm pretty liberal with the color. So black is perfect. I am definitely people use thread that is often too heavy for their skill level. So you'll see a lot of people like using saltwater threads and things like that on these larger streamers, and that's okay if you can get the materials on there without too much bulk. But often I don't think you can. So I'm usually like between 6 and 3/0 uni or Orvis for my streamers. Uni 6/0 is, I don't care what they say, it is way thicker than 6/0 anything else. I don't know if it's a diameter. It might just be like a material thing and an inconsistency thing. But I'll use a 6/0, 136 denier or denier or whatever it's called on an articulated streamer. Often, if I'm using Orvis thread, I'll often use a 3/0.
What's going on there?
For trout streamers.
You got the shakes?
No. What do you mean?
It just sounded like your computer was fighting you.
Oh, weird.
And do you ever do something like a nano silk? Would you ever do a Kevlar thread? Any sort of more unique, specific threads that you might get into? Or are you just going to be straight up like 6/0, 3/0 black? I'm good to go.
Yeah. No, I'm not too fancy with the threads. I know there's a lot of cool stuff out there that I haven't experimented with, and maybe one day I will. But right now it's if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
What's your scissor situation? And I'm going to tell you, I endorse the Pat Cohen's. Wish he made a more narrow point, but those scissors are sharp and they're heavy in the hand, and they don't bend. Get dinged up.
Yeah. Maybe it's awesome. I just bought new scissors. I just bought a new like scissor kit. It's on the way from Orvis right now. I think I started with Dr. Slick scissors.
R.I.P. Dr. Slick.
Yeah.
A couple months ago.
Yeah. When I first started fly tying, which was, I don't know how many years. It's been a lot, like age 15 or something. And I'm 33 now. You can do the math on that. And then I immediately moved to Orvis stuff. And I've kind of been using Orvis brand scissors ever since. I always get this, like, Orvis has like a kit of 3 scissors. And like, you know, every 4 or 5 years I buy this kit. And it's got like a set of precisions, and then like the old kit becomes like my junk scissors. And I put a little piece of blue tape on them to designate that they're like dull, like starting to dull. And I use them for, you know, cutting junk stuff like bucktail or
things that'll dull it.
Yeah, copper wire. Right, exactly. I always have like a good set and a dull set.
When I grab my nice scissors and I'm not paying attention and I go to cut beetle on, I'm like, oh, damn it. Like, I've got wire cutting pliers right in front of me.
Ooh.
But sometimes I'll have my loon scissors and I'm like, oh, dude.
And you just go cut it. Yeah, that's funny. You know what I really want to do though is the guy that in the riffle. What's his name?
I don't remember his name, but that's a pretty prolific site.
He did the damsel recently, didn't he? A couple years ago.
You mean Flagler?
Is that who did it?
Yeah, Flagler did the damsel not too long ago.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure the damsel's been covered in the riffle.
Maybe, yeah, maybe. But this guy, he files down the back end of his whip finisher.
Yeah, that's Tim Flagler, because Thomas and Stankus were both introduced me to that for cutting.
Yes, I want to do that. Have you done it? Have you tried
I don't
it?
really use a whip finisher that much. I can half hitch, and if it's a presentation fly for somebody, then I'll do that because it's a need or not.
Yeah.
But the last thing you want me to have something that's sharp on one end and dull on the other that I'm gonna poke myself with.
It's true.
You don't need too many sharp objects. I cut my finger open today on a piece of bamboo that was cut at an angle with like hedge trimmers. And I didn't see it, and I went to chop something in the garden, and I hit it with my index finger. And now I've got like a bifurcated index finger almost. It's pretty gross. I get hurt with things. I don't want too many sharp objects near me. Which is odd for the business I'm in, which is pretty much all sharp things.
Yeah.
All right, I have the word density. Would that be, I'm going to say density of the material? So if you want something to sink, are you going to use dense material, or are you going to rely on something else to get it down versus something that's buoyant? Say dry flies, you use deer hair. Wet flies, like bunny, it sinks. Do you lean towards materials based on the properties they have?
Yes, but I don't know that I would use the word density. I guess I just don't think about it that way. So 2 things. If you want to get the fly down, so let's just talk about a floating line. Let's say you're using a floating line. If you want to get the fly down, the first thing you want to do is have a longer leader. The second thing you want to do is have less material, whatever it is. So the sparser the fly, the faster it's going to get down, right? It's kind of like why, like a much sparser Clouser minnow sinks faster than one that's got more bucktail on it, right? The more bucktail you put on the Clouser minnow, the harder it's going to be to get down. Then I typically rely on some sort of weight, right? So whether it's going to be a cone, or it's going to be dumbbell eyes, or whether it's going to be a lead or lead-free wire wrap, right? That's going to help me too. But you want the most bang for your buck in a material, in my opinion. Marabou is a good example, right? Marabou gives you the perception of a large, moving, pulsating profile.
Which is my next question: is materials that breathe, which would be Marabou, like the undulation in the water by itself, where you can hold a fly still in the current, and it's going to do all that action for you.
Right. So I would say largely it it just depends. Because it's relative, right? Some very dense, you can't, like, here's an example. You can't say deer hair, because a bucktail is much less hollow than
the body hair.
Deer belly, right? Exactly, right. Like deer belly is gonna float at a much higher rate than the bucktail, right? So I don't know that I would use, but I would say that less material almost always equates to getting down faster.
What are some of your favorite materials you tie your flies with?
My favorite is Marabou. My guilty pleasure is guinea. I can find a way to put guinea on everything.
I always have a hard time just finding a really nice guinea fowl. I got to get through every packet.
You can buy it direct. That's because guinea feathers are largely inconsistent when you get them. But here's the thing. They're inconsistent because they're no different than chickens, right? Like, you get large ones, you get small ones. There's different ones that could be used for different things. You can get them as small enough to use them as soft hackles. But typically when you go to a fly shop, and here's the thing, even the best fly shops, and we gotta cut fly shops some slack here. Even the best fly shops are pretty, I'm not going to say poorly assorted, they're pretty limited in what they have in fly tying relative to what's out there. There's just not enough space, right? And people are looking for a 4X long streamer hook, a bead, and a Marabou and some chenille to tie a woolly bugger, or rubber worm supplies or a pheasant tail 90% of the time. It's 90% of the time it's some really basic fly that they're tying, which is cool. And the more advanced tiers, like myself, are looking for all of these, different little pieces and parts that very few people ever buy. So we can't get mad at the fly shops for not having everything. Guinea is definitely something that gets skimped on. You can get bulk guinea fibers at most fly shops, feathers, and I like them a lot. Similar to the reason I like Schlappen so much.
Well, I can
They're
cross that
really
out now. That's on my other list here. Cross out Schlappen.
They're really, I prefer Schlappen over Rooster most of the time, unless I'm tying smaller flies, because it's the guinea is webby and it's really strong and it offers a lot of movement. And then obviously it comes in all these really cool, it's kind of a steelhead salmon-y fiber. So it comes in a lot of really cool colors that make great accents. So I put guinea on a lot of collars, between an articulation point, things like that, just to add another little element to a fly. So a good example is like, if I'm tying a fly that's olive, maybe an olive or a brown, I'm always going to throw like an orange guinea collar on it. Not always, but often, just to give it a little extra something. I call it like a hot spot. I don't know if it works, if it adds any fish fooling ability, but I think it looks cool personally. So that's my guilty pleasure is guinea, for sure. My favorite is Marabou. I think all streamers. It's got to be, to me, it's got to be the best fly tying material there is. Might not be the most versatile, but it's definitely, it just moves unlike anything.
Things that get me excited in fly tying is when I open up a pack of Marabou and it's just really good and wispy and long, and I'm not even breathing and there's no air movement in the room, but you can see them just.
I know.
Breathing.
It's amazing.
I get excited. It's like when you're a chef and you just get like a really good piece of marbled beef or something, I guess. I get excited for Marabou. I've got my Ziploc bag right here. This is a hefty, what size Ziploc bag is this? This is probably a gallon plus Ziploc bag, and I probably have 30 or 40 different packs of Marabou in there. Gotta be more than that.
You got to look through it before you buy it.
Yeah, I have trouble buying it online. That's always a gamble.
Yeah, it is, because they come in too short, or they come in and like there's all that white stuff in the bottom, or there's like separations in the fibers, so you can't palmer them very well.
Yeah, really stiff stem to it.
I had a guy tell me recently that his local fly, he's not from around here, that his local fly shop gets mad when he opens up the bags and looks through the materials.
I would encourage that if I was in a fly shop. I would want to see that someone's that dedicated to the art that they would want to pick out exactly what they need.
Yeah, it's like if you're going to a grocery store and you pick up an onion or an apple, you don't just grab the closest one, right?
I would go through 12 heads of garlic. We did Amazon Prime for food once during all of this, and they brought everything wrong. I was like, I need an iceberg lettuce. We got a head of cabbage.
Mm-hmm.
I asked for navel oranges. I got tangerines. I'm like, you know what? We're not doing this again.
Yeah, I mean, I like when I go to fly shops, I buy materials that I don't need at all
If it's good.
because I found good ones, and I know I'm going to need it eventually.
With bucktail, that's one of those things you have to examine more than anything else.
Yeah,
Is
absolutely.
bucktail.
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure.
All right. You want to talk about hooks?
Yeah.
There used to be not just, there's a lot of couture hook companies out there. And people like to talk about the hooks they tie on more than why they're using it. And there's very distinct hooks out there for specific reasons. What hook shapes, be it eyes, the bend, the length, what do you look for in a quality hook that you are going to dress for a streamer?
I mean, again, it largely depends on the fly, right? You know, it's trying to figure out a good way to answer this question. I mean, the first thing is length for me. You know, well, the first thing is whether or not I'm going to articulate the streamer or not, right? That's the first thing. I want the right hook length for a streamer, right? So I kind of figure out, you know, you figure out how long, and this is something that never gets talked about in fly tying videos, and it drives me nuts. And I try to touch on it like when I do talks and stuff. You should know how long the pattern is from the head to the tail before you ever start tying it, right? Like you should know how long you want it to be or it's supposed to be. And I think that's important with helping the hook, right? So here's an example, right? So if you know, like certain things, like a woolly bugger's tail is the same length as the hook shank, right?
The symmetry to it.
Right. So you know that the only thing that hangs off the back is the tail, right? So if the pattern's going to be a, you know, if you want a 3-inch long woolly bugger, let's say, right? You need a hook that's going to be relatively 2 inches long, or excuse me, or a hook that's relatively, 1.5 inches long, right? So that tells you the size right there, right? Because a 4 is shorter than a 2, and a 6 is shorter than a 4, right? And so that, I guess that's how I've always looked at it. Like, so I find the length, like how big I want the fly to be. I find the hook that matches the length I'm looking for, and then I need a gap relative to the size, right? Because not all like you know, there are flies that are tied in size 1 that are way larger than flies that are tied in 2/0, right? Because the shape of the fly is different, gap of the hook is different. You know what I mean? Like you have to know. It's not like a one size fits all with hook size, right? So the first thing I want to know is like how long the hook is. I need to know how strong the hook is. I want to, and then I want to look at the gap of the hook.
What about a heavy hook versus light? Not just strength, but maybe to add just that little bit more sinking ability to your fly?
Yeah, so that's one good advantage, right? So for streamers, you can get some extra sinking ability out of your fly and some extra durability out of your fly by using a heavier gauge hook, right? So a good example of that would be like one of my favorite hooks to tie on is a Gamakatsu B10S. It's a super popular hook.
I have one right here in a size
Yeah.
6. Super
Right.
sharp. I like the bend on it.
Chemically sharpened. It's got a nice wide gap. It's a good bend. It is used for. It's used way too often in places it shouldn't be used, but it is a great hook. It's heavy, right?
Yeah, if I could get 1,000 of these in a size 4, that's my choice for Clousers too.
Actually, I don't like it for clousers.
Oh.
I'm not a.
I
That's
like
not.
the Orvis size 1 saltwater hook. The 15. Nope, that's the wrong one. 90-34s. No,
Yeah.
size 2. That's what I like for Clousers also.
All my clousers get tied on that, even if they're fresh. Even though I'm using them in freshwater, I just use a smaller one in freshwater. But some guys do tie them on that B10S is a good hook for that. I use that hook a lot. I do think that certain hooks. The problem is that hook, it doesn't work for everything. I like that for a back hook on most articulated streamers. On single flies, that's a great hook for one you're tying a thing but I don't usually like it as a front hook on most articulated streamers because the shank is too short. So I will often use the Gamakatsu. Oh geez, what is it? The SP11 3HLH or something. I think it's like something along those lines. It's a very similar hook. I think they call it the perfect bend hook.
I've got a catalog here.
Yeah, see what you got. That's my favorite, like in an articulated streamer, that's my favorite front hook.
What number?
I think it's like SPH. SP. My wife is like sitting at the.
SL45.
No, I think that's.
Hold on. Here we go. Specialty hooks. SP11.
Yeah, 3. It's like a dash.
SP11-3H.
Yeah.
These 3X long, 3X heavy, perfect
Yep.
bend,
Yep.
tin-plated saltwater hooks are all. I like that bend. Also a favorite for freshwater streamer hook.
Yeah, that's my favorite front hook, and then the B10S is my favorite back hook.
I'm gonna have to pick some of these SP11 3LHs up.
I also use bass hooks for the front hook a lot too. I am not afraid. I love the Tiemco special use hook.
Is that the one you tied on the other night? That's super long.
Yeah, I use it for. It's actually like for poppers and deer hair bugs. But I find that it makes a great front hook for a trout streamer. It's a nice wide gap on it. And also too, like I use a lot of my trout streamers interchangeably with my smallmouth streamers. It's a finer wire for sure. And it's not as strong as some of the others, but it's enough. I mean, I've caught so many big trout on that hook. I've never had one bend ever. What is that? That's the special use. I'm so bad with some of the model numbers unless they're Orvis. It's the Tiemco. They just call it the special use hook, but it definitely has a model number. Let me see if I can Google it real quick.
I've got TMC Bass Saltwater 8089 deer hair bass bug hook.
Yeah, that's the one.
Wide gap.
Yep.
Size 2, size 6, size 10, size 12.
Yeah, no 4 in that, I don't think, right?
Not listed in this catalog.
Yeah, I think it's, they need to, if they don't have it, they need that hook in a 4, for sure.
All right, if you're listening, TMC.
Yeah.
Get cracking on that. Art needs a hook.
Yeah, it's the 8089 special use hook. And it's definitely a lighter wire, but I don't know. I'm obsessed with the fact that you need a wide gap on that front hook.
Right Now, let's talk about connecting. If you're going to do a double hook, what is your preferred connection material, and what is the purpose of the bead? Do I need beads on mine?
So I think this all depends. It depends on what you're doing. Lots of different connection points or connection materials. Day in, day out, is if I got a good size eye. If you have really skinny eyes on your hook, this one's a tough one, just because it's too, I don't know if malleable is the word. It bends too easily. It's gel spun backing. So gel spun backing is a very strong, like braided. I think it's like what is it? Is it braided Dacron?
Yeah, it's braided nylon, I think.
Nylon, maybe. Yeah, it's super strong.
But it wobbles too much. It's too soft.
It's very soft. It's a little tough to thread through the eye if you have a skinny eye. But if you have a big eye, it's really easy. I use that. Most of my streamers are that, because I can. It's just it's on a roll. It's really easy to use. The Senyo's trailer wire, in my opinion, is a poor product to make that articulation.
The coating
that's not what that product was designed for. It's called trailer wire, right? That product is designed originally for, and you know, Greg can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's called trailer wire. It was designed to go off the back of an intruder fly on a loop that you could slide a trailer hook or some sort of stinger hook over the back and pull it, and it was rigid enough to hold that hook in place off the trail of a fly. It was never meant to be used as a connection. But I think what happened is when it came out, it got into fly shops, and it was the only thing that a fly shop carried that you could make that connection, I think. And so people started using it for articulation, but you shouldn't be using any like $8 for 3 feet product to make that connection. You can use a lot of things. Regular Dacron backing works just fine for that. Firewire, which you can get at Home Depot, works for that. Monofilament, 12 to 20 pound works for that really well. Something that you're okay with throwing away, is all you need.
I have found that somebody at a show gave me a retractable scalpel. Something I shouldn't own. Kind of clumsy guy. I told you already. Sharp objects in here, not good. If I use that to cut firewire, it is the cleanest cut, and it will go through anything. Scissors always leave it a little bit.
Yeah, it's tough.
Frayed, but man, that retractable scalpel.
That's the good thing about that trailer wire, though, is you can get it through a tiny hook shank really easily. So that's good.
Now, do you ever find you might use something that's too thick and the trailing hook eye just doesn't get the action you want because there's not enough wobble room in there?
No, I haven't had that happen.
That was the fly we lost.
I've had that happen if I pull it too tight on the beads.
So let's talk about the beads.
Okay.
I have, in front of me, I have component beads, make your own. And then I have plastic pearl-looking beads from the craft store. Mm-hmm. Nothing special. Mm-hmm. They work when I need them to, but I don't really understand why I put them in. Nothing really, jackknifes like a trailer, which is what I always thought they were intended to prevent.
So I think they definitely prevent the fly from fouling. Not that it won't still foul, because it will still foul. But I do think the fly jackknifes depending on the material that you use. So if you use monofilament, for instance, to make that connection, it's more rigid. I don't think it swings as much as if you use like the Dacron or the gel spun, for instance. I think you get more. I think you get more movement on that fly, depending on how long that connection is. I think they also protect the material. Here an example would be like something that would grab the material, wouldn't grab it. if that makes any sense. So like, if you were to throw that thing up into a tree or something like that, and you got an opening between those two pieces of material that you've wrapped over, it's hard to kind of explain.
That's why I want to go fish in Iceland.
The beads protect that opening. The beads protect that opening. I actually think they add a little bit of, I don't know, color to the fly too. Like
a little flair, a little pizzazz.
Like I got this giant, like 6 millimeter bead craft kit of glass beads, and like I got all kinds of colors. I think it kind of adds a little something to the fly. If they're not a rattle, but they definitely slam into each other when you strip on that fly, and I guarantee you that adds a little bit of ticking to the bug that fish may or may not pick up on their lateral lines. I don't know. So there's a lot of thoughts in my head, but I think it's mostly just a separation, kind of hinge point that I think the idea was to prevent that fly from being able to fully swing around and foul, but it still will.
Now, with the second hook, have you ever been stuck while undoing a fish by the other hook? Because I have, and it hurts. I don't like having two hooks on a fly.
Yes, I have definitely. I pinch the barbs on all my flies.
Always. Dude, I'm not going to the hospital right now during this corona business because I didn't de-barb a hook.
There's no fish that I need to catch that, like, I smash the barbs on all the flies.
So let's take a break now. Let's talk about Walmart parking lot at Tyson's.
Oh my God! Yeah. That's why I de-barb all my flies. That incident right there.
Nicest Walmart you will ever find.
Oh my Lord, yeah, dude. So I was.
This must have been like 6 years ago now.
Yeah. Without giving this spot away, there's a grass carp that lives in.
So it's one of the TPFR guys' backyards. I dropped off flies, and I'm like, you've got a pond back there. By chance, is this where Walter lives? He's like, Walter? And I explained. He's like, how did you know that fish was in there?
Yeah.
And I said, Art.
Yeah. So largest freshwater fish I've ever seen, put eyes on, or fish to, lives in a pond in Northern Virginia.
Past tense.
Yeah, right. Past tense?
He said he hasn't seen it in a while.
Oh, that's sad. In this fish, I don't know how long it is. I don't know how long it is. It's maybe it's 5 feet long. Maybe 4.5 feet long. I don't know. It's I've seen plenty of big muskie. This dwarfs any big muskie I've ever seen. And it's I couldn't even tell you what it is in pounds, but I've looked at like the state record grass carp, and this thing would eat the state record. And I've tried to catch it. I tried to catch it for years, and I used to go like once a day for like 3 years over the summer every day, and I try to catch this thing after work, and I got it to eat multiple times, and he broke me off multiple times, and I got lots of follows, and it's just in a really hard situation where you can't make a good cast, and you got every problem you could ever imagine with back cast issues, and he sits in places that you can't reach him. But regardless, I was going through all kinds of different fly options and buying a lot of flies and learning a lot about grass carp to try to catch this thing. I didn't pinch the barb of there's just like it was actually like a floating or some kind of dragonfly larva fly that I was looking at that I bought, and I didn't pinch the barb, and it was actually pretty big. And I had the leader in my right hand and like all this slack that I was carrying around because I kept making these like casts at the fish. And I was walking, and the line, my fly line, like got caught on some kind of stick on the ground, and it just pulled right into my hand, and the barb like buried deep down in. Terry Cummings' son was with me, Colin, at the time.
So if if Terry's grandpa Shad, what do we call his kid? Like,
I don't know. Grandson Chad? I don't know.
I don't know. Little Peepaw Shad?
Yeah, exactly. But we had to like go to this Walmart, get some stuff, and like I pushed it through the other side of my hand. And, it was nasty. And we crimped the barb and got it out. Saved me the emergency room visit.
My goodness. Did you pour some tussin on it?
Crimp your barbs. Some tussin. No.
Break your leg, pour some tussin on it.
Yeah, we had...
Rub it in there real good down to the bone.
Chris Rock, huh?
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the head shape. So things like drunken disorderly versus something with a cone head. Are you aiming for the action that a head would give the fly versus making it look more like something the fish is going to eat? Or both?
I like heads that'll push the water a little bit, so that Litch's Double D great bug, that's also kind of a Midwest smallmouth jam. I like the swinging D better personally. Both of those flies were meant to be fished on sinking lines. One has a deer hair head on it, a no weight, and the other has like a popper, like a foam slider head. Those are smallmouth flies. But they work great for trout. They're meant to be fished on sinking lines, number one. Number two, the heads, I think, are designed to push water and dive and move. They're both like sort of diver style heads. I don't know that they add anything to the fly in terms of realism or anything like that, but damn do they both work. They're both great bugs. They're basically, they're for all intents and purposes, the same fly tied with different heads. I think one has some rabbit on it and one doesn't. But yeah, I like, what was the question? I guess
head shape and how it makes the fish. How about head shape and how it moves in the water versus what you want the fish to see? Like, do you want it to be moving water and you're going to design it to have some kind of wedge to it versus something that's just going to straight up just make it sink and you're not really interested? How do you work a head into your streamers? Like, what do you...
Yeah, okay. So
and I'm going to go grab a beer. Hold on a second. You keep talking.
Yeah, go ahead. So for me, if I'm going to, I think this largely depends on what I'm using it for, obviously, but I want a fly to push a lot of water, especially if I'm going to be fishing it on a sinking line, and especially if I'm going to be fishing it in conditions that are less than favorable, like i.e. muddy water or extremely high currents or something to that effect. Floating line, and usually that's a sinking line fly to me, or a fly that's going to get down really deep. So a good example, like if I'm trying to imitate a sculpin, I want a very big head on that fly because those sculpins are usually down pretty deep, and their body shape is they have really big heads that push a lot of water. Now, I'm going to give you a great example. I was fishing a stream the other day that had some big fish in it that were really spooky. The water was gin clear. It was a very cold limestoner, but the water was gin clear. And we wanted something that wasn't going to, a streamer that wasn't going to...
soft landing.
Yeah, kind of a soft landing in a situation where we were working some fish that did not want to take a dry fly or a dropper. So we were going to see if we could move one on a streamer. We went to a small, like really skinny, it was actually a saltwater pattern called a Cohen Silverside, which is a very sneaky low water or spring creek for us special. It's a saltwater fly that's designed for whatever. I don't know if it's supposed to look like an anchovy or a whatever, but
it's a Silverside.
Yeah, it looks like a silver.
Menidia, Atlantic Silverside.
Is that the jam?
I believe that's the Latin name.
You can tie those things on freshwater hooks and fish them for trout in like spring creeks or limestoners, and damn, do they work. They work great. So sometimes you want to mimic like a little, you want a little bit of softer landing, a little bit less intrusive or obtrusive, one of those words.
Are you doing deer hair right now?
Oh, no, I'm tapping my finger. That was my fault, sorry. Okay. What else you got, Rob?
I want to talk about eyes. Now, we talked about predators, striking at the head. That's where the eyes are. You kill an organism and you hit the heads. Do you do them for show? Do you do it for actual predatory instinct for the trout? And what eyes are you going to tie and for when? Like, when would you use a dumbbell eye versus a stick-on eye?
Yeah. I think it's all for show. I've been using the same dumbbell eye for a long time. It is the Spirit River
Dazzle eye?
Living Eye.
Living eye.
Spirit River.
Those tie in nicely too.
I know.
Some dumbbell eyes I don't like the way they tie in. That's an easy one. The Spirit River ones have always tied in nicely for me.
They always tie in nicely. They are like indestructible. You can bounce them off of concrete. They don't chip or break or peel now they're expensive. They're not cheap.
$1 a bag maybe?
No, they're more than that.
Crikey.
$8, $7 for 15, I think. Yeah, they're not inexpensive.
But if you're going for that fish,
but
the big one,
like I get it. I actually reuse them.
You cut them out?
Yeah, like on Clousers,
No, if I have a busted up hook,
you bounce them off the wall and your deer hair explodes and whatever. I mean, you could just reuse them, cut them. And
you could have used some of those razor blades that were just all over the ground today at Chain Bridge where little kids are walking barefoot.
Bunch of razor blades?
Dude, they were just razor blades on the ground. I don't know if people were cutting line. Who knows? There was a white perch with a circle hook through its nose just on shore, and the fish was floppy this morning.
So you use stick-on eyes when you don't use dumbbell eyes. I mean, that's pretty much it to me, right?
You don't need it to sink. You stick them on. Now, do you glue them? Do you use epoxy?
I glue them.
What's your glue choice?
My glue choice, and I have, I've got Loon and I've got UV flashlights and all of that jazz, and my favorite is the Zap Gel for that purpose. Zap Gel. I will tell you this, I am not the best at gluing on eyes, but that Zap Gel is very forgiving. It takes a minute to dry. You can kind of wiggle, you stick them into place. Try not to use too much, but I like the nozzle on it. I have always used the Zap Gel. You've seen it, right? It comes in like the little black
metal tube. I have one somewhere.
Little black metal tube. Yeah, that's always what I've used. I dig that one.
And if Dave Whitlock is a huge fan of that product, I'm going to say it's pretty damn good.
Is he? Is he the one?
He loves the Zap. You can buy Zap-A-Gap, all that product straight off his website.
Yeah, I like that. I like that stuff. That's funny. I use that a lot for the deer hair poppers and stuff that I tie.
You mentioned the pinch method recently on Instagram chat. What is the pinch method? Because Steven Sautner, who is related to Namphos, also mentioned it, but we didn't get into a description. What's that pinch method?
Oh, we're talking about in tying.
Yeah.
So the pinch technique is something that is great for tying in a lot of different materials, and people don't use it often enough, and sometimes I see people trying to use it but not using it correctly. So basically what the pinch technique is that you're with your thumb and your index finger, you're grabbing either side of a material, whatever it is. You're then placing that material on top of the hook and pinching both sides of the hook along with both sides of the material. And then what you do is you grab your thread and you put it up in between the two fingers So then you have both sides of the material, both sides of the hook, and both sides of the thread in between your thumb and index finger. And then you pull the thread down on the opposite side of the hook, and you repeat this, 2 to 3 to 4 times. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to, because the thread is actually riding the inside of those two fingers as it crosses the hook, it allows you to place subsequent wraps all in the same place while varying the tension without the materials rolling on the hook or rolling on or around the hook and bulking up by putting too much very tight thread wraps onto the exact same spot. Okay. I know that's kind of long, but I think that's the textbook answer.
When should somebody burn their fly with a lighter?
There's a couple times. One, I say that first and foremost is when you're making monofilament eyes, which I do often. So anytime I tie like a crab or a shrimp, or sometimes with crayfish patterns, sometimes like if I'm doing damsel.
We all know about that, man. I seen you take lighters to like the head of a clouser, beer tie style. You always burning heads. What's the deal?
Oh yeah. So like if you're using if you crowd your eye and you can't finish it, as long as you're using like a thick flat waxed thread, often you can burn. Once the fly is finished, you can take the lighter and just slowly creep it towards the eye of the hook, and the materials or the wax thread will slowly start to curl back onto the fly, sort of sealing it. It's kind of really hard to explain, but it's something that you can use if you're using the right thread. You can use it if you've accidentally crowded the eye of the hook.
So I've been using that. I've been selling a lot of gar flies. You can buy those on my Etsy site.
Nice.
The gar flies, I've been using a lighter just to singe all the random pieces, and then I can wrap over it.
Yeah. That's good too.
Any tying materials I forgot to ask you? Tying techniques?
Dubbing loops. Start tying dubbing loops.
And you need the OPST dubbing twister. You spin that. I know your thing was made in the 60s. Yours probably has lead and asbestos in it. Like the same people that made yours were the manufacturers of lawn darts. You don't remember? You're too young to remember lawn darts, right?
I know what they are. Yeah.
My God, look up.
Yeah.
They used to be able to see pictures, X-rays of kids with lawn darts in their heads.
Oh, that's
horrifying product.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
But dubbing loops, absolutely. Like that's a lost. Do people not? Is that a lost art? Are people terrified of dubbing loops?
Why? It's intimidating.
Why is it intimidating?
I don't know. Once you learn to do that, and then you do a composite loop, that's fun. I spent like 3 weeks learning how to do composite loops for steelhead flies.
I don't even know what a composite loop is. What is that?
It's where you lay it all down, and you add first the dubbing, and then you add what's like the long strands of flash, and then you put another piece of dubbing over that, and then you pick it all up and put that in the loop. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a dubbing loop, right?
It's just like a little. You put extra stuff in it.
Yeah, I know what you're talking. I didn't know there was like a name for it. Yeah, learn to tie dubbing loops. Learn to split your thread. You'll be amazed. It makes certain things so much easier. It makes things quicker. It makes things cheaper. You can create a dubbing brush in seconds. With all sorts of different great materials to help, bulk up a fly or get like a more wispiness or more action out of your fly. You can experiment with all these different great techniques or materials that you can stick in there. You can blend things right on the spot. Yeah, it's good.
All right.
Dubbing
loops. All right. What do you store your streamers in?
I got multiple ones on the way too. I use the Cliff's Bugger Beasts. I got two sitting in the kitchen or underneath the tying desk right now, and I got 3 more on the way, brand new ones that will eventually get filled with stuff. Remember,
I might need to do everyone ties Art a fly.
Yeah, I gotta get all my flies back. Like the only flies I own right now fit are things that I've just tied recently.
Cicadas.
Like fit in a. I got like 1 bugger beast, 1 bugger barn are all my streamers.
Okay.
So like probably like a half a bugger beast and 1 bugger barn have all my streamers in them. And then all the rest of the flies are in one little foam slotted box. So I lost like just,
Plethora.
Probably 30 boxes worth of flies.
And what is that person going to do with them? Seriously.
Yeah, I'm pissed. But, it's all right. It gives me an excuse to like tie things,
right.
And so.
All right, dude. Let's talk about your dip and wiggle. What is Art's dip and wiggle?
Yeah. So, especially when you're casting sinking lines from an anchored position. So, this is more, I don't really do this much I have done this for trout. Matter of fact, it's funny. I did this for trout 2 days ago from the bank. Couple things. So one, it is basically it's a stack mend. That's basically what it is. If you're presenting downstream, right, and you don't have the room to cast behind you, or maybe you're really new to fishing and you can't cast a sinking line with a heavy fly very well, you fish in deep water, and you're trying to get the fly down and then strip it back up. This is something that we use a lot when we're shad fishing or striper fishing from boats at Fletcher's. You'll throw 15 as far as you can, basically easily out in front of you, and then you have like all the rest of your fly line on the deck of the boat. You just sort of wiggle it out left, up and down or left and right to get I like to go up and down to get the fly line out off the deck of the boat, and basically the current pulls out the slack as and the fly sinks faster because it's under slack. So you're sinking, then the current straightens it out. And when the current straightens it out, you pull it back upstream, and then you just rinse and repeat. And you're not really casting the fly overhead once it's in the water. You can just kind of dip the tip of the rod in, wiggle the slack out, strip it back in, rinse and repeat. Usually it's a boat thing. Actually, it was interesting. I was at the confluence of 2 streams a couple days ago, and there was a bridge behind us, so I couldn't cast behind me.
So there's a bridge. We're getting closer to figuring out where you were fishing.
Yeah.
Mark down, there's trout, and there's a bridge.
And so I was, stack mending in that way from that one little spot. I had no space whatsoever behind me, and couldn't even make a roll cast. It was so tight in there. So I just kind of flicked it out and stack mended and just kind of dipped it in and wiggled all the line out, took it downstream, stripped it back up, and just kept doing that.
I dig your dip and wiggle. All right, let's talk about. We're gonna go through these a little fast. What favorite knot do you tie your streamers on with?
The non-slip mono loop.
Okay.
Every time.
What about people that get exhausted from casting a big streamer? What's advice you'd give them besides fishing a smaller streamer? If they want to fish a big one, but they're getting tired.
Dip and wiggle. Okay. No, if you're getting tired, turn around and throw it on your back cast.
Yes. My client the other day, he threw some of the most ridiculous underhand, backhanded casts I have ever seen, not just from a normal client, but Dennis was throwing these crazy backhand casts and throwing it like I've never seen a client do it ever. And he was launching these streamers just out for shad and stripers, and it was nuts. And Dennis, if you're hearing this, shout out to you for being one of the best casters I've ever seen. Nice. Yeah, he was throwing it up towards the trees and then just backhanding it into the river, 60 feet.
Wow,
with accuracy.
Yeah.
I was just sitting there with my arms crossed. I'm like, dude,
Yeah,
That's impressive.
it really changes, the muscle groups I think that you're using when you throw backhanded, right? It's slightly different. So yeah, I mean, often when I start to get tired, I'll immediately just present the other direction, just present from a back cast.
Have you ever had to dive into the water to retrieve an expensive streamer?
Dive into the
Or
water.
just go in after it, like the guys today with their dip nets or the cast nets? Have you ever just broken off or just got one stuck and you're like, you know what? I'm doing everything to not lose that fly.
I mean, I've done some things. I've rowed boats across rivers. I've waded in really deep. I've semi-climbed some trees, but I've never dove into the water, no. But I also don't fish a lot of game changers, though. If I paid $15 for a fly, I might.
You might put your floaties on.
Yeah, I might go get that thing.
What about setting the hook on a streamer that might be deep or far away that you just, is it strip set? You want people to trout set? You want them to tarpon set? And how would you detect it?
What's a tarpon set? Is that
like strip strike?
Well, yeah.
Like pump.
Yeah. For the streamer, I almost always want a strip set. Yeah, there's very few exceptions to that, in my opinion. I definitely want a strip set, right? I want to hit him and then hit him again, right? Absolutely strip strike.
Okay.
But and then get the rod up and get the rod bent. I think one mistake that people make is after they strip set, they're like pointing the rod at the fish, and they're letting the tip of the rod fight the fish. And not that doesn't work, because you can fight a fish pointing the rod directly at it. I've seen it done on purpose, intentionally. Sometimes you watch it in those some of those permit or some of those trevally videos. Those guys are aiming the rod directly at the tip of the rod directly at the fish. Even huge trout. I mean, get the rod bent, right? Get sideways pressure on it and bend the rod down into the butt section of the rod, right? Don't aim it at the fish. Don't put it at 12 o'clock, but get its head turned towards the bank or toward the boat.
Streamers, you ever fish them at night? And if so, what advice would you have for anglers?
Totally. Nighttime is a great time to fish streamers. Probably one of the best times. Nighttime and early morning. My advice would be careful, right? So if you have wind, understand wind. And this is during the day too, right? If you're right-handed and the wind's on your right shoulder, put the tip of the rod on the left side of your body before you cast, and then that way the wind is blowing the loop away from you. Don't hook yourself. At nighttime, use flies that are bulky, that are going to move a lot of water, that are going to make a lot of disturbance when you strip them. Fish don't see as well in the dark, so we want to make a ruckus so that they pick it up on their lateral lines to help find it. So rattles and things like that are great to have in your bugs at night.
Flies for turbid water versus clear. We already mentioned having the soft landing. Anything you would throw if you're in some murky, nasty water?
Yeah,
Big body flies.
Black and purple. Black, darker. The darker that the water, the darker the fly should be. Some people use chartreuse. I'm sure that works too, and I don't know. But as soon as the water's muddy, I am going black, purple, black, red, black and dark green, dark brown. These deep dark colors, I think, are what shows up the best in dirty water. I know it almost doesn't make sense, but it's like a contrast thing for me.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
sunlight versus cloudy.
Cloudy for sure. I mean, not that I haven't had great days I have had great streamer days on bluebird skies. Definitely have. But I do think that overcast overcast helps the streamer situation, especially the large streamer situation.
I thought we were going to absolutely crush stripers this morning when it was overcast. The last 2 days, not a single striper. I don't know.
I've heard it's been slow up by Fletcher's. Better luck down at the Tidal
We got hickory shad on Memorial Day weekend, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
All right, what about water temperature? Is it too hot to throw streamers? And then I know a cold fish would rather eat a streamer than a nymph because it's going to get more fat for the cold. But have you ever found fish too lethargic in hot water to chase something down?
No, definitely not. We're talking trout.
Indeed, the trouts.
No, but then again, I don't know. No, in fact, some of the largest fish I have ever found have been on streamers in water that is places that is warm enough that you wouldn't expect trout to be there. And those fish eat streamers and bait fish and things exclusively. We're talking fish that are, well over 20 inches. So no, I think that the reason trout are in warmer water because they have outgrown the bug game. Well, I guess there's two parts to that question. You might be just referring to the regular fish that the water just gets too hot. Maybe, yeah. I guess I could see that. They're not as willing to expose themselves because of the heat. I don't know. I don't really have an answer for that part of the question.
We'll come back to that in a couple of months.
I've never really thought that through.
All right. What about approach? Are you going to be sneaky man on your hands and knees? You going to hide behind a tree when you're throwing something? Some big streamer action. You going to
not with the
art incognito?
It depends. I usually say no. Yesterday or the other day.
Where were you fishing again?
I watched Mike. What's that?
Exactly.
Yeah. I watched Mike stealthily poke a streamer into a suspect place, but into a sneaky little place. But usually, if I'm streamer fishing and I'm waiting and things like that, I'm gripping. I'm kind of gripping and ripping, man. I'm going through something quick and throwing up well enough ahead of me that I'm not walking over any fish, and I'm just looking for a player. Somebody. So no, I'm very stealthy when I dry fly fish and nymph, but streamer fishing, no.
So when would you strip versus swing versus dead drift?
So if I am across the stream, and I'm throwing kind of down and across, there's always going to be a little bit of a swinging element. If you need to make a cast upstream, so if you're fishing like a spring creek, for instance, and you don't have a lot of room and you got to make an upstream cast, you need to strip fast, always. Strip down and fast just to keep tension on the line and keep the fly moving. There is no wrong way, in my opinion, to fish a streamer. Upstream, downstream, up and across, swing. Vary your techniques and what you're doing. You will be surprised day to day what works and doesn't work.
Okay. Now, people sometimes... This is kind of the end before we get to the random questions now. People refer to their streamer rod. What's a setup if someone's coming into the shop that they're like, I want to target some fish. I'm going to Arkansas. You're going to fish the White River. We're going to throw streamers.
I'll tell you what, let me hit the head real fast.
Let's do that together. I'm going to race you.
All right.
Go. I'm done. Did I win? I beat you.
You did beat me.
Remember, if you shake it more than 3 times, you're playing with it.
That's the dip and wiggle, right?
All right, so what's a good rig? If someone specifically wants a rod for throwing streamers, what's a good setup?
For trout?
Yeah.
A 9'6" or 9'7" weight rod, I think. I really like the 7 for that. But, 6 works fine too. For me, it would probably be a medium to fast action fly rod with a combination of lines with it, right? For the various conditions. So like a 7 weight and a 250 grain full sinking line is an awesome boat rod for streamer fishing on most rivers. A good wade fishing jam would be I'm not into these like streamer stripper lines, by the way. Like I'm not into lines that like have 2 to 6 feet of sink tip. I don't know that really does anything at all, personally. I'm really not a fan of those. Or they do very little to get that fly down.
Word up.
So I like kind of at least 15 feet, a 15-foot sink tip for wading or a floating line.
What about an addition of the poly leader?
No, that's not what a poly leader is used for. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what a poly leader was designed for and what it does. A poly leader was designed as to put on the end of a Scandi head for spay fishing. It is largely something with mass that tungsten coated leader is something with mass that'll help move the fly and transfer the energy from the larger the Scandi head down to the fly, and has a sinking element to it. But that does like the exact same thing as the sink tip, which isn't enough, right? Like I would almost just rather have the floating line, right, and a longer leader. Like if I'm wade fishing, I just don't see that getting anything down on a larger streamer. It's just not enough to make it worth it to me.
All right. Ready for some random questions? Anything else about streamers that's a FAQ with the shop or experience? Anything that I didn't ask about?
So learn to use the rod to move the streamer, not the fly line. So like when you strip, you should just be stripping your slack up, right? So like twitch with the rod, use your wrist to move the streamer, and then strip the slack with your fly line. Okay. Or with your stripping hand. That gives the fly much more action. It's a much more realistic swim.
Dig it. Now, you ready for the randoms?
Yeah.
Brittany or Christina?
Christina, definitely.
Armageddon or Deep Impact?
Armageddon.
GoBots or Transformers?
Transformers.
VHS or Betamax?
VHS.
Popeyes or KFC Sandwich?
Did you say sandwich or biscuit? Because we'll have a conversation.
I don't eat biscuits out anymore.
Okay.
I've been taught to make a proper Southern biscuit, and I can no longer eat.
I've never had a Popeyes sandwich, but if you just ask me KFC or Popeyes, I'm going Popeyes.
Popeyes does have a better commercially made biscuit.
Yeah, right. But the chicken, yeah.
If you were only allowed to fish for one type of species for the rest of your life, what would you choose?
One species, rest of my life. I think it would be trout. Trout. Yeah.
If you could be quarantined with anybody other than Bunny right now or Trent, who would it be?
Other than family members, I'd have to go with Tom Waits.
Very cool. All right. What's the worst place you've ever fished that you would steer people away from?
I know last time we did this, I said Elk Creek in PA because I was mad at it. That's okay. That was the only one. The worst place I've ever fished that I'm trying to think of another bad one that I don't want to go to again.
Simon Gosworth said Brittany, France.
Brittany, that's like a whole place.
Yeah.
A whole location.
I've always wanted to go there since the Bourdain episode when he went with Eric Repair.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I mean, to be honest, and I was even kind of angry at an Elk Creek experience when we talked last time, but I don't know. I try to find the silver lining, as Tim Linehan would say, in every situation. I haven't really hated anything that much.
What are you scared of in life? Any animals, situations, things you try to avoid?
I don't like spiders. For sure don't like spiders.
I can dig that too. All right, strangest thing you found while fishing round 2? I'm going to give you an example. Last week with a client, I see some monofilament in the water. You know what? I'm going to grab that monofilament and pull it out. There was a fish attached to it. It was a piece of monofilament with a white perch. And the mono went in the mouth, out the gills, and back around and was tied. So the fish was alive and swimming around in the water, attached to monofilament, tied to a rock.
Yeah, that was a stringer, right?
No, I don't know. It was just one.
Huh.
And we're all like, what is that?
So I was fishing the tidal basin with T. Jones.
That recent striper, man. I was getting some questions from other people. I said, go look at Instagram, man. That's the intake.
So, dude, so that day, right, there's a whole funny story before this striper. That striper has a funny story behind it.
Mr. Pajama Pants.
So we were fishing stripers all day that day and some other places too. But right before that striper, the story behind that exact fish was, we can only fish that spot one at a time. So T. Jones is in there and he pitches and he's got something on. And I'll send you pictures of this. He catches a giant snail.
Oh, the Japanese trapdoor snails?
And it grabbed his clouser and completely engulfed his clouser minnow.
And never pick up a floating trapdoor snail, because if they're dead, you can't get that smell off you. Just a heads up.
So he pries this clouser out with a knife, and it's mangled, and it's got snail juice all over it. And then he throws it in and hooks that striper.
Really?
That's exactly what happened. Ask him.
Snail juice.
Snail. And I posted that and I called him the Snail Master. That fish did not count. That was a live bait situation, in my opinion. Once you marinate a clouser in snail juice, that's like you are now bait fishing.
Snail juice would be a great band name too.
But I have a picture. I have a grip and grin of Trent Jones fully legitimately in the mouth caught a snail. Andrew
Zimmern ate those in an episode. He liked them. He was in Virginia Beach eating Japanese trapdoor snails. Yeah, if you see one floating, never pick it up. Okay, next question. What is something that every fly angler needs to experience in their life?
Hooking sight fishing at cobia. That is something else, man. Those things are that is a lot of action in a very short amount of time. And that's a very exciting deal. Absolutely.
If money is no option, you find a blank check that says Jeff Bezos on it. You get a vehicle and a boat to go with it. What are you getting?
A vehicle and
what are you going to tow it with, and what are you towing?
Man, wow, I don't know.
Neither do I.
I mean, I'm getting a giant, like, military grade, like, jet that I can drive the vehicle onto and land that private jet anywhere I want. For sure. I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Can you do any impersonations?
Impersonations?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Can you do Trent?
No, I can't do Trent. I can do Tommy Mattioli.
Go for it.
Hey, yo, I'm gonna tell you something, buddy. I have sold flies for my whole life, and you sell so many clousers out of your shop that I'm surprised there's any deer left in North America.
That's pretty funny.
I talk to him like every day.
Okay. Yeah, I need to get him on an episode. All right. What's one thing you've lost while fishing that still angers you for having lost it?
I lost a Nomad. I lost a net recently. Not too recently, but
And you called it by the original name, the Nomad Net.
yeah, the Nomad net. And
I remember when those first came out, I was like, I need that now.
Because I don't know, like I had like a sling pack, and I like sort of had it jammed in between the sling pack, and I thought it was linked, thought it was clipped on a D-ring, and it wasn't, and disappeared. Super mad about that.
If you could have a superhero's power to make you a better angler, what would you choose?
Flight.
Okay, if you could fish with any celebrity that is an angler, who would you choose?
So last time I answered Mel Krieger, but
That's an industry, like a celebrity,
Yeah,
like a musician or artist,
celebrity.
not an industry person.
Who is an angler?
Yes. You may have seen on Fly Fishing the World back in the day, like Liam Neeson fishing golf ponds in Ireland.
I don't know. I think it would be cool to fish with Henry Winkler.
I'm reaching out to him to get him on here. I have not been able to hear back from him.
Yeah, the Fonz.
Anyone who has a connection to the Fonz, y'all let me know. I got a private plane waiting for you at the airport. It's gassed up. It's full of every gear you could ever imagine. Where are we going?
New Zealand.
Okay. What's your last meal, if you could plan it?
All I can eat.
Sushi.
No.
What's your fancy sushi called?
It's gonna be no. That's not what it's gonna be. It's gonna be oysters. It's gonna be oysters, man. Yeah. I mean, if it's a whole meal, I get like a whole shellfish. You know.
The seafood tower from the Anthony Bourdain episode of Brittany, France.
That's kind of what I'd be after, something like that.
I looked at that and was like, that's worth anaphylactic shock to eat that, maybe.
Yeah.
That's EpiPens, I want to dig in. Last question again. What's a story you had to be there to believe?
A story you would had to have been there to believe.
Something you've seen. I saw a squirrel swim across a river once. No one believed me. I didn't know squirrels could swim.
I don't know, man. When I caught that bull trout, that was pretty cool.
Tell the bull trout story. It was on a streamer.
Yeah, it was. So, you know, I'm fishing. I'm fishing with this guy, Monty Muniz, awesome dude, and up in northwest Montana, like all the way as far north as you can go before you're in the Canadian Rockies. This is I'm on a hosted trip that I'm doing with Linehan Outfitting Company, and it's the last day of the trip, and we had caught some big rainbows already on streamers, and it's the last day of the trip. There's this guy Monty takes me to this place, and we're rowing down the river, and he's like, yeah, you know, like I think there's a big bow in this hole here, because all season long, we've been like hooking, you know, smaller cutthroat and rainbows at the top of the riffle here on dry flies, and you know, as they dump down out of the riffle and into the pool, you know, they're getting eaten by something large. And he says, you know, why don't you grab your streamer rod here and see if you can move that fish, and he tells me where to cast it. He's like, yeah, you know, put it like right in front of that rock there and let it swing on in. And it's funny because I completely missed the cast. I picked it up, and I had a fly that resembled a cutthroat. It was actually one of Tommy Mattioli's half and halves that was tied in sort of a cutthroat regalia type of coloring. And it was saltwater fly I caught this thing on, which is funny. I missed the cast. Bad cast, wasn't even close. Hit the water. The cast I made was maybe 20 feet at the most. Hit the water in the wrong spot, and I strip on it once to pick it back up to try to cast it to the right spot, and bam.
Bam!
The biggest bull trout they had ever...
Of all time.
that they had ever seen in 30 years, apparently, of guiding there. And, you know, we measured it and weighed it, and I don't even talk about how big it was because people just don't even, you wouldn't believe me if I told you, but it's definitely the biggest bull trout I've ever seen. You know, at the time, I don't even know at the time when I caught it, I'm not even sure that I saw a picture of one that was that large, in like an inland trout that was that large. Like I had seen like pictures of, you know, lake and anadromous fish and stuff that were that big, but never like a river born inside the continental US, you know, trout species.
We'll use that as the head cover for this social media for this episode.
You know, it was just nuts. So you can't legally target those types of fish.
But if they bite, if it's them biting you,
I mean, there's nothing you can do. It's not like you're out there fishing for them. They're there. And they eat the same thing that when you're fishing the Kootenai with streamers, you're after rainbow trout, and that river has the state record rainbows in it. You know, I mean, that's like a big fish territory. And so, you can find some big bull trout in there. There's also sturgeon in that river, apparently.
That's weird.
Yeah.
All right, dude. So we'll see you fishing. Where was that spot again? It was where in Maryland?
Not giving it up, man.
All right.
It's somewhere out there.
All right, so next one, do you want to do nymphs or warm water fishing? Largies and smallies versus nymphs.
Oh, either one, man. Either one.
All right, we'll flip a coin. I gotta go do a social distant event in the neighborhood, so we'll catch up soon.
Awesome, man.
Art, thank you again for your time.
All right, buddy. Take it easy.
Dude.
All right.
Thank you. And it recorded this time, I hope.
All right.
Yeah, dude. All right, man. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for the Fly Fishing Consultant Podcast. For more information or to contact Rob, please go to www.robsnowhite.com. This podcast is brought to you by Freestone Productions at freestoneproductions.com.